Hi, everybody. Welcome. We have some new people joining us at 11 who have joined us for the panel session. So thank you so much for joining us. If you have just joined us right now, please introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from and how did you hear about Women at DE's conference. And so if we could stop that recording for the first session, and then we can start a new one. Thank you. So thank you so much. So I'd like to welcome everybody. And in this session here, my name is Angeline, and I will be your moderator. And I'm going to be joined with Julia Campbell, who's from our Women Ed DE Frankfurt group. And she will also be moderating with me, vielleicht auf Deutsch auch.
Und schauen, wie sich's ergibt.
Well, mein Deutsch ist nicht so gut. And we are also joined by some panelists who we will introduce in a moment. And I would like to thank also Loretta from our Frankfurt group, who is helping us out with all things Zoom, and Layla, who's also co-hosting today. And they are going to keep an eye on the chat for me, because while I have my screen shared, it's really hard to keep an eye on both. And so they'll let us know if there are any questions that come up and any comments that are going to be shared. So thank you so much for your time and energies to the whole Women at DE group. We are a volunteer organization, so we really rely on everyone's time. So I'm going to hand it over to Julia, who's just going to give us some housekeeping notes.
Yeah, thank you, Angie. It's my first ever panel discussion, so I'm pretty excited. And the housekeeping notes are basically the same as in the other sessions too, so please mute yourself. You can write questions in the chat, and also we'll have the opportunity to have you ask questions and speak with the panelists during the session, at the end of the session as well. Yes, whenever you would like to comment on our day, you can do that via the hashtag #WomenAd over Twitter, and you can also engage in our community using the Women at DE Twitter handle.
Great, and it's my absolute honor to introduce our first panelist, Elizabeth Palathra. I have the pleasure of working with Elizabeth at Berlin International School. She's originally from Long Island and from a South Asian family. She's moved to Germany in 2014. She's a special education teacher with experience in DC, and she's passionate about justice, inclusion, and equity, and the culture in her classroom. And I've seen this firsthand, live, visiting her classroom. It really empowers all of her students. And you can follow her on Twitter at Liz Lausche. I believe that's how you. So Liz teacher in Chinese, I think, Elizabeth, and there as well. So welcome, Elizabeth. And Elizabeth, please feel free to unmute yourself and say hello if you like.
Hello, thank you for having me, and I'm very honored to have the invite, and I look forward to today's discussion.
Great that you could join us. And another guest who is one of our panelists today is Dr. Eleonore Soei-Winkels. And I learned how to pronounce this because LinkedIn has a wonderful pronunciation app where you can listen to people's pronunciations of their names. So we have never actually met in person, but Eleonore and I are connected through the Panda Women in Leadership Network, which is a German network for women in leadership. And so I thought, if I'm looking for people on the panel, I thought Eleonore is going to be great because she's a professor of industrial and occupational psychology at the German FOM Hochschule. And she was appointed in 2014 when she was pregnant, I believe. And she's a mother of 2 now. She's also extremely digitally savvy. You'll see her. She's got an enormous social media presence on Instagram, TikTok, and she's also a neuroscientist and coach. And she's really working to empower students online and offline as a facilitator of learning. So you can see all of her handles here. And I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you, Eleonore, today. Welcome. And I'm going to hand it over to Julia now.
Yeah, Grace McCallum, we've already Had the honor to listen to you. So welcome back to the panel. And we're excited to hear more of your stories and your insight on the discussion points that we will have.
Thank you so much for having me as a member of the panel. I'm honored and excited.
This is going to be great to be able to follow our conversations from your opening keynote. Thank you. And Julia, if you could introduce her.
Yeah, this is Liza-Jo Guyatt. Thank you for joining us. And it's quite interesting to see because like in the chat discussion of Grace's keynote, there was already, you know, like discussions going on, very inspiring things to see. And I met Lisa through LinkedIn because I really liked her inspirational posts. And so I thought I would reach out to her and ask her if she would be willing to speak for us and be part of this panel. And she has agreed to do so. So I'm really happy, Lisa, that you are here today. And yeah, just about Lisa's background, she's a professional educator, a coach, she's a consultant, she is an NPL practitioner from the UK. She's been in education for a long time in various roles, in various capacities, also with various age groups, colleges, universities, schools. I think her story is extremely interesting because she learned to read and write as an adult and then went into the university, tertiary education, and that's what she's doing now as well. And she is very passionate about equality and diversity, which fits our concept and fits our whole agenda. And you can follow her on Twitter. The Twitter handle is below. So thank you, Liza-Jo, for joining us. And maybe you would also like to say hi to our viewers and listeners.
Hello, yeah, good morning from the UK. I'm super excited. I make no apology for being really loud, really bright and really out there. So put your sunglasses on if I'm not your jam, but it's how I am. I just want to say thank you so much to Grace. So much of that resonated with me. And so many of those things line up with the things with how I've led to where I am now. And a lot of it is around women not recognising that they can empower each other and then working in their perception of a male paradigm, which then makes women behave in very strange ways. And it did happen to me. So thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. It's fabulous. Thank you.
Thanks, Liza-Jo. So yeah, so just one thing we wanted to start with was to ask the panel about, what kind of individual mindsets do you think hold women back? And how have you personally overcome a mindset that perhaps held you back? Grace, in her opening keynote, talked about, confidence and how sometimes it's something that is perceived that women do not have enough confidence and hence are not maybe aspiring to become leaders or reaching out and doing things that they need to, but in actual fact that is not actually a barrier. So instead of thinking about what needs to be fixed in women, it's more the institutional systems that we have. And so we're going to also talk about institutional systems in our session today, but I would like to begin with thinking about what do you think are these mindsets that may be fixed and that we perhaps need to grow in order to do that. So perhaps if we could start with you, Eleonore. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, thanks. That's I think a big question, because I think that as a psychologist, socialization starts in the core family. So parents have the duty, once they want to conceive a child, they have the duty to raise a child in such a way that it functions in the society. So parents are also brought up with values, how a society works, fine. And then as parents, they have to dissect which of these values are valid or maybe wrong, or maybe it's time for a change. But the kid, as it's brought up, is sort of like helpless it's exposed to the values of the parents that they transport and teach and raise the child in. And so I think the mindset that I think that is holding women back in education specifically is that we are possibly hold back by you have to care for your siblings, you have to do the things to make things nice, and it's not so much on being smarter than the others, and you have to know your place. And especially know your place is something that where for me intersectionality comes into the game, because I am obviously from Asian descent. So my parents are Asian, Chinese. They both of them were raised in Indonesia, so I know the Indonesian language. And I always hear this or heard this when I was little: know your place. Know your place. It's not, you're not the eldest, you're not this, and you're not the whatever. And I think that my parents did a great job to become feminists on the way when they raised me. They acknowledge that I don't have an older brother, I am the eldest, I am a woman, and I can be whatever I want. They had trouble when we went back to our home country, to Indonesia, because that was the clash of values. So for me, as a person, as a parent nowadays, it tries to, what are the values that I want to teach my kid? And for me, my parents told me you can become whatever you want. You just have to believe in yourself. Just because we were brought up like this, you don't have to. You can choose. And you can choose whatever you want. So they would have been okay with me if I hadn't become a leader. They just told me, I remember my dad, he said, we're both academics. You can do the same job if you haven't climbed up the ladder like me, but then on the other hand, you'll be working harder. So you can choose, you can choose not to study, but just be aware that probably you will be denied certain positions that will make your life easier. And he was so right. And my mom is a feminist. She's been always a working mom. My dad is a feminist. He had been a stay-home dad for a couple of years. So I'm very proud and thankful for the mindset. I personally have to say I'm privileged. I didn't have such a mindset to overcome because I was lifted up by my parents already. And I hope that, many on this panel see that there's a lot of power that teachers can have, but the first step starts in the core family.
Thank you so much, Eleonore. Great points about the mindsets we inherit as and in families and that stay very dominant throughout generations too, right? And so if you come from a specific cultural background, it happens to be underrepresented in where you live or in the different areas or even in the media, from depending on where you are, these messages are seen and reiterated around us and in our cultural norms surrounding in society as well as within our families. So these are excellent points that you've made about how we develop and what we inherit in our families, but then also what we can grow as we, of course, leave the nest and enter into our professions, and thinking about the educational profession and bringing it back. I'd like to call you now, Elizabeth, to think about perhaps, what do you think are some mindsets that perhaps hold women who are aspiring or are leaders in education? What do you think perhaps are holding people back or maybe an obstacle to overcome?
Yeah, I just wanted to build on what Eleonore was saying, because I think that intersectionality is so important to address because our experiences are diverse. And when I reflect on this question, I recognize that it's not just my place in this world as a woman, but as a child of immigrants and as a woman of color, and carrying those. My parents, for example, are quite progressive, but also very traditional in their understanding of gender roles and norms. So growing up, it was very much like, yes, we want your education is important. We want to see you climb that ladder and know your place and make yourself small and put the needs of everybody else ahead of your own. And I think that was something that I learned before I ever learned confidence and self-love. And so I've had to do a lot of work in unlearning that. And I think for me personally, when I think about how I've overcome that or how I am overcoming that, I think Grace said it beautifully about having mentors that advocate for you and being able to practice confidence in safe spaces and making sure that you have that support system of those examples in your life and in your surroundings.
Great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for sharing. And Liza-Jo, I believe you coach people, and as well as does Grace. And I'd love to hear from you about what you commonly find or hear or see, and along this issue.
Yeah, the most common thing that I come across, and more so during the pandemic as well, there is a fear. There's an absolute fear. And it's all about feeling. It isn't necessarily about being, it's the feeling and the mindset that holds the people back that I'm working with, is the fact that they're really, really consciously and unconsciously concerned about what other people think, and they can't get over the fact that actually people don't really care that much about what you're doing, because they're in their own world, they're in their own sphere. But we think that they're all watching what we're doing all the time. So it prevents people from letting go of those limiting beliefs. And I think those limiting beliefs, going back to what Eleanor said, come from childhood. They come from the past experiences. And those limiting beliefs become roadblocks and really stop women moving forward. And I'm a great believer. I know we mentioned in the last session about teachers and leaders and principals, etc. But I believe everybody is a leader within education. They're a leader within the realm that they work in. They lead in their classroom. They lead in their communities that they lead. And the mindset that holds women back is people are going to be watching. They're going to trip. They're going to look as if they're not competent. And it's that feeling of not being competent, not being the best. And a lot of the work that I'm doing is about, going to what Elizabeth says, about women actually putting themselves first. Because if you put yourself first, everyone around you benefits. And I learned the hard way from my experience being a professional educator in a high leadership position, that actually I put everybody else first. And the organisation first, which had a massive impact on me. And if you do encourage women to turn their negative beliefs into positive facts, then they can really overcome that mindset. And that's about actually looking at all the fantastic things you've done in your life. And when you look at it all from when you're a child, all the things you've achieved, all the things people have said, all the things that have been really, really beneficial to the world. And when you look at that, you can fill a book. And when you realise that, the negative things are just floating around and you can't grab hold of them. So for me, that's the biggest thing, the limiting beliefs and the fear. And for me personally, overcoming my mindset was something that was totally ingrained to me. I'm from the travelling community, so I didn't learn to read and write. It was all about living, doing, earning money, and it wasn't a big education, wasn't something that was afforded to me as the norm. And I overcame my mindset by actually recognising, and I will tell the story later on in one of the other questions, but realising that actually I can be what I want to be. I can do what I want to do. And it's not all just about what it is now today, because things change. Things change all the time. So I overcome my mindset by recognising that change is definitely a given. Death and taxes and change. And if you can accept them three things, I think then you can really release your negative mindsets. Thank you.
Thank you, Liza-Jo. Yes, death, taxes, and taxes, there's a German sore point here. If there's any efficient place here in Germany, it's the Finanzamt. And I love what you said about, changing the negative beliefs into positive facts. and lifting people up in this way. And I know, Grace, that you've been someone, because I've worked with a lot of people who are working with you in your school, and who have, you know, lauded that this is what you do. And so I'm wondering too, if you'd like to share, you know, how some things that you do to help maybe shift people's mindsets.
Thank you. Sure. You know, one of the mindsets that I always find interesting when I'm coaching someone who perhaps is a classroom teacher, and they know that maybe their bucket's not being filled up every day like it used to be, and they know they want to stay in education, but they're not sure where to go. You know, I've noticed that, you know, some people feel really fulfilled in that classroom role, and that they could stay there for their entire career and feel absolutely fulfilled. But for those who want more, I feel like they have this mindset that education is a ladder, and they're not necessarily wrong in terms of the way education was structured traditionally. But I have teachers who come to me and they say, you know, Grace, I really want something more in education, but I don't really want to be a vice principal or a principal or a head of school. And that traditionally is the ladder. There's not a lot of movement in schools, is the mindset. But what I find interesting is, you know, really talking with teachers to say, well, what's your passion? What's your why? You know, why do you love education? Why do you want more? What is that? And after we identify that, let's talk about how you write proposals. Let's talk about how you go to your head of school and say, hey, this job doesn't exist and it should, and I'd be perfect for it. It's so interesting. I think I mentioned my coach, Alicia Morris, in the presentation. And I was talking with her one time and she said, you know, Grace, I've never had a job after I was a counselor. She was a school counselor for a long time. I've never had a job that existed before I took it. And I thought, that's so interesting. So, you know, now we do have other positions, like instructional coaches. And it's really, especially if you're at, I know for some state schools that can be really challenging, but for some private schools or international schools or schools that are really looking forward for future readiness, those proposals, school heads are just eager to hear those. You know, how do you make a school better based on your passion? So I guess a mindset that I would say maybe holds women back is just thinking that it's not, that it's linear and that there's a ladder. I think there's so much room for your creativity and there's so many spaces for your passion to lie. You just need to be a risk taker and put it out there. And I think that would be one of the mindsets that I think I would love for people to challenge in their own thinking.
Yeah, well, great advice. And I think we often do have this, and I think it falls back into what was being said before about, you know, we've been kind of conditioned in our families to be like, you know, the good girls who follow and fulfill roles. And so in schools, there are certain roles that we think exist, whereas we could actually co-create roles, new roles, and really challenge the hierarchical structures that exist in our schools that were, let's be honest, not designed by women at the time in which it was created. Highly likely, you know, and because you know, century ago, you know, there weren't even that many female teachers, right? And in the time of its construction, it was, you know, very designed in a very hierarchical way. You ascend in that way. Whereas I think also that's our notions of traditional leadership. Whereas like many of you have brought up, you know, leadership is really an impact you can have rather than a position. Yeah. And so whilst Women Ed is trying to help aspiring and existing women leaders, we do, I know in Women Ed DE, we also want to support all women and into how they can make a difference and have an impact, and not just in a traditionally recognized position as well. So thank you for bringing all of that up and for all of your insights into this. We wanted to share with you a few quotes. And so one comes from Maya Angelou. You know, each time a woman stands up for herself without knowing it, possibly without claiming it, she stands up for all women. So we're sending these messages to our peers each time we speak up or do something, and that in itself is a leadership step, right? And a way to change how we behave and a mindset we want others to take on board. And of course, if you want the very popular quote, you know, that there's a special place in hell for women who do not help other women. And I mean, I'm not religious, so I, you know, like these concepts are also a little foreign to me, but there are these kind of polarizing things, and we do also need allies and alliances, and it's not just women as well who fall into this gap. And I know also that when you talk about the intersectionality that you brought up, Elizabeth and Eleonora, whenever we just by calling ourselves women ed, you know, we've already not recognized, you know, non-binary identities, and so I do also want to say that we're also striving to improve and to be more inclusive and to think about how we can do that, right? And so nothing's perfect ever, and so we're trying to always think about how we can innovate, how we can do something differently in order to try and achieve and reach as many people as possible. And at this stage, I'm going to stop talking and hand it over to Julia, who will lead this next question.
Yeah, and I think it actually leads on perfectly, because I really like this idea of, you know, like standing up for yourself, creating your own like impact, and thinking about how you want to make the impact, and how you want to bring in your creativity. And then, of course, by doing that, you allow others to do the same, and kind of like do that bit of sponsorship and lifting others up and paving the way for them. So, and we've heard some of that already from Grace in her keynote, but I would like to know who in your community has sponsored you, has supported you as an educator or an educational leader, and how has this experience influenced how you support other women? So maybe we will start with Lisa on that.
Okay, thank you. So right, so who in my community supported me as an educational leader? So I have got a story. I will make it as quick as I can, but I do want you to hang on to this story, because this is something that when I speak it, when I look at it, and when I remember it, it just makes my heart sing, and it's fantastic. And it's all about the girl on the bus. So as I say, I didn't have a traditional schooling, didn't learn to read and write. My mother was actually an opioid addict. So as a child, I used to have to do whatever I could to stop her breaking the law so that she could be well, so that we could live and all the rest of it. But that's another part of the story. So I didn't learn to read and write. I ended up with a small child, no education, couldn't read and write. And I used to quite often jump on the bus with my small child and sandwiches and go round and have jam meat sandwiches in whichever park we passed. And it was fabulous, and we had a great time, me and my firstborn. It was great. And then one day I met a girl on the bus, and the girl I met on the bus had also got a small child. So as two children started looking at each other, we started chatting. She told me that she was going to the local college, and hand on heart, I didn't even know what a college was. She said, I'm going to the college. She said, they've got a program running over the summer. They're going to pay for the childcare. They're going to pay for the travel, and the course is free. Come along. And I said, well, I don't really know. And we got chatting. Before you know it, because I was a follower in them days, not a leader, I followed her to the college and went with her. And I ended up doing a 6-week learn to learn course. And the tutor was absolutely fantastic. I remember her name. Her name was Carol. And she said to me, come on, I'm going to teach you to read and write. And she did. In 6 weeks, she taught me to read and write. She convinced me to sign up for college. I signed up for the college in the September with my child. And admittedly, there was money involved, because they were going to pay for my nursery. They were going to pay for my travel. And I got sponsored from here, there and everywhere for people that really wanted me to do well. I did a 12-month access course, which was the equivalent to 4 A levels. I did my English and my maths. And before you know it, I was at university doing a science degree. So I did a science degree. And again, I was a follower. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I applied to do physiotherapy because somebody else was. Got a place, got there. hated it. It was all very white, very middle class. One of the tutors said to me straight away, you don't want to be a physio if you've got a small child because you're never going to fit it in. Straight away, that boggled my head. So I left and went on to do teacher training. I became a professional educator, and the more I learned and the more I grew, the more fantastic my life became. I came out of a really abusive relationship that I was in at the time, and just ended up growing and flourishing. And from that day forward, I've always been a real advocate for education. So I didn't come into it till I was 28 years of age. And I'd got by all my life. I used to say, if I had to fill out a form, I forgot my glasses. Well, in them days, I didn't wear glasses. But I got by and I did it. And I knew that if I bought something for 10 quid and sold it for 20 quid, I'd earn a tenner. And that's how I got by. And it was fabulous. So I would never knock people who didn't go down the traditional educational route, but I always support people to recognise they can. Do you know what? They can. So the person who supported me in my community was the girl on the bus. Never saw her again. Would love to see her and see what she was doing, because she wanted to be a nurse, but I don't know what happened to her after that 6 weeks. So this experience has influenced me to support other women in education. I went on, I've had a fantastic career, over 25 years, teaching in primary school, secondary school, further education, higher education, worked my way all the way up to be a campus principal in an organisation that had a female leadership team. And I've got to say, ladies, this hurts. It was the worst experience I'd ever had in my life. It absolutely smashed me. I burnt out because the expectation of this all-female leadership team was that you worked in that their understanding of a male paradigm. So you come in extremely early, you work extremely late, you do 70 hours a week, and it was a toxic environment. And I felt myself, I'd always been a person that would question. I was always been the person that would support everybody. I felt myself going down their route. It was like the Emperor's New Clothes. Everything everybody was talking about, I couldn't see it. And everybody else was nodding and I couldn't nod and I couldn't speak. So I burnt out and ended up, I had to walk away. And I walked away. And as I walked away and looked over my shoulder, I thought, do you know what? Actually, I am a leader. I am fantastic. I'm going to lead and I'm going to support other women to stay in the job that they love. And that's what I've been doing since. I've been supporting other professional educators to work on their work-life balance, to put themselves first so that everybody else benefits, and to question, to be able to step into their confidence and speak out without fear of retribution in their home, because I've had to do that, in their community and in their workplace. So thank you. Hope that was interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I know Liza-Jo's story because we talked beforehand, and I thought, like this is the perfect fit and so inspiring, and just, that drive to keep going, and sometimes even being inspired by people, not necessarily with them having the impact to change your life, to inspire you, but building on what Grace said, that like there's so many different ways people can make an impact without having like a leader label, or just to, like to change people's lives. And I think that's what we do as teachers. And no matter what we do to have that, the beauty of impacting others, I think that's one of the best parts of the profession. So thank you, Liza-Jo, for sharing. And maybe Elizabeth, would you like to share how you were supported in your community and what you do to support others in education?
Sure, thank you. So when I think about the people who have supported me as an educator leader, there have been so many wonderful people in my life in that way, and I feel very fortunate. I think I don't have a specific story, but I can speak to what has helped me kind of build my confidence and, kind of erase those limiting beliefs that I have about myself. It's the leaders in education who have seen my potential and have provided me with opportunities to elevate my voice in very, very safe, small steps. Because I find that, taking on these larger roles is quite overwhelming and intimidating for me personally. And so, for example, my current principal, who I work with. She has provided me with very small ways that I can, in my opinion, small ways, being a leader in my learning community without feeling like I'm putting myself too far out there. And I think that this is something, these small steps can lead to greater things or to bigger things. And so this is something that I try to then also practice and do with the people and the women in my community as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Eleonore, would you like to go next and sharing your story?
Yeah, thanks. While I was listening, there were a couple of associations that I wanted to address, but I just changed it now. And so this is more of a spontaneous answer. I had a dean, quite a young dean of studies, and she was brilliant. She's 10 years older than me, and she had 2 kids that were running around during her summer festivities or whatever. And she was such a badass scientist, really. I adored her. And when she was lecturing, it was mind-boggling. I stayed until the very last minute she left the room, and then followed her until the elevator. That great she was as a teacher and lecturer. And I wanted to ask her whether I can learn from her. I wanted to do my thesis with her, and she said no. And she later then became my mentor. And she said, you know what, when you asked me, what you didn't see is that I was swimming. You thought maybe it was great, but for me I was a single mom. I had 2 children. I was a dean of studies. I felt insecure at that time. And when you asked me, I thought that I wouldn't be able to support you as much as you deserve. And later on, we talked about that situation. I went to another thesis supervisor. It didn't went well, and she said, that was one of my biggest regrets, that I saw you walking into a situation which I could have changed, but I didn't. And I think this is something for me. I'm a mentor. I'm a multiple mentor. I do mentor women first, but I also do mentor men who are also interested in inclusion. And I think that it's the same line of arguments that I have as a parent, as a mother. I think when we raised kids, we raised children being boys and girls. And I think you cannot just empower women without making men see that they don't have to be like this. I'm also a coach, and I frequently have men who say, I don't want to be a leader. I'm being promoted, and I don't know how I can tell them without losing without losing my face, that I cannot see myself in that position. And I think that as a society, this is something that there are people who want to lead and there are people who can't. And I always ask the question, why do you want to lead? And if they want, regardless of gender or background, whatever, I mean, diversity is so much more than this. I support them. And more related to this question, as a neuroscientist, I know that the brain, once you look into the brain and dissect it, it all looks the same, regardless of how you look, how old you are and everything. I mean, you can tell the age, but okay, unless other than that, personality and everything, you cannot see in the brain, in the human brain. So what I do try is to support them where they are, what they need, and it's totally target specific. You have to, Grace said something about the vocabulary that you have to learn to be successful, and that's the same. It all goes down to to the ability to communicate to the other in a way that the other understands it where they are and not where I am. What I try today is to influence and support other women in education, but also in other business areas, because I'm not just in education, is that just believe in it yourself and try to see what value can you bring to the table. Because when you know the company's goals, when you know what the overall overarching goal is, then you can see what other contributions you are able to do and at what cost are you willing to do them. Because you have a life that is longer than just now. And as a coach, I can only say we all have resources. The resources can be vanishing, they can be drowned out, and you just have to think when you cannot, I always say, like with this tree image, I can only provide shade and fruits when I'm a strong tree. And my parents always said, you know, you have the gift of two worlds. You can be like a bamboo and you can bend, but you have to be strong. You have to bend back. And that's what it's all about, I think. As a neuroscientist, I'd always try it's timing, when you tell it, how you tell it, to whom you speak. And sometimes as a psychologist, I know with Bandura, you can role model and you'll never know when the message that you were trying to convey will sink in, or if it ever sinks in. But the intention for me is always trying to support others, whatever I do.
Thank you so much. That was really insightful. And I think what I can summarize from what you've been saying so far, there's a couple things that are really important, like putting yourself first, knowing what your skills are, or having somebody to maybe even paint that picture for you if you can't see it yourself. And then also this equation to still fit that in with what can I give, what are the circumstances, and how do I best bring to the table what I have, and who can be at that table with me and share that with me. So thank you so much for that. Grace, maybe since we've heard from you before, but still, we would be interested in more, you were elaborating more on who are the barriers in a way, but maybe you can talk about who supported you, and I know you've supported a lot of people on your way, talking to your colleagues from FIS.
Well, in my speech, I was talking a lot about this void in more experienced female mentorship, right? And about how, but I also mentioned about women in my experience bracket. And I want to talk about them, and I want to name them because they supported me. So when I started off as a school leader, I started off as a school leader at the Canadian International School of Beijing. And I was a principal there. It was my first time being a principal. I was also a literacy leader there. There are a couple people on this call who are at that school with me. Alana, Michelle, Charlotte, wonderful people who I miss very much. But what was so special about that experience was I was a brand new principal. Our vice principal, Katrina Bloom, brand new. Bree Eddy was a coordinator, brand new. Sarah Fitzpatrick was a coach, brand new. Chelsea McClellan came in later on that year, brand new. Megan Catney was a coordinator, Maria Tran, all brand new. And we had no idea what we were doing. We did like a fake it till you make it, but we did not know what we were doing. It was such a bizarre situation to all be new, like what a year. And I mean, people have their different opinions, but I think we did a great job. And I absolutely valued and loved those women I just named because, I remember leaving. I remember getting ready to move on to my next school. And we were all sitting together having lunch, and we just got really emotional. And I think we knew that this support that we had was something that we were really going to miss. I was a young mom. I wasn't a young mom. I had young kids. I wasn't so young, but I had young kids, and it was hard. That year was hard. I faced a lot of barriers from older or more experienced females in my school that really just they were not cheering me on. They had no interest in mentoring me or helping me. In fact, I have to say, sometimes I have the impression that they maybe didn't want me to succeed. But those women did, and they came in every morning and they checked in on me. And what I loved about them is not just our relationship and how much we really came together to support each other and cheer each other on, but they really taught me the art of noticing. They would just know that, we were all in a unique position, and they would notice when I was trying to hide it and I was really overwhelmed and just trying to fake it till I made it and do my best. They noticed it, and they would see me, and they would say it, and they would offer me support, and they would pick me up. And I appreciated that so much. And it's really influenced how I support other women in education now. And now at this school, I have women who do the same thing for me. They're on this call, Joya, Dawn. And I mean, you cannot be in a leadership position if you don't have that support. And so I now want to be that support for other women because I see the impact. So I would say those people have supported me, and they'll always be people that I just cherish because of that. And this has definitely influenced how I support other women, because I see the power in, if you can't get sponsored or mentored by someone more experienced from you, you kind of just have to lean on each other. And that has been incredible.
Thank you. And I can attest, like the lifting up, the picking up, the interest, your colleagues, they speak really highly about you, and you really do make an impact. And it's nice to see. And I didn't know you beforehand, so like your team at your school, you seem to be a really great community of lifting each other up and supporting each other.
Yes, we're very, very lucky.
And Melinda Gates, wrote a. Sorry, Grace. And I just wanted to point out that Melinda Gates wrote a book called The Moment of Lift, and it's all, and we've added a quote here. So she wrote that if you want to lift up humanity, empower women. It is the most comprehensive, pervasive, high leverage investment you can make in human beings, and then really. Essentially too, I think you see the rise of women in leadership being recognized, especially throughout the pandemic and throughout with the countries that are kind of thriving under that leadership, because women have if we're looking at feminine and masculine, these kind of dichotomous and pervasive narratives of what leadership looks like in those with that kind of labels, that the feminine and female leadership styles are really valuable. And with that at the core, if we lift that up and having those diverse perspectives in those conversations, making decisions for our students in schools, then I think that we're going to be really better places for us to work in, but also for our students to thrive in. And I think that's what we all want in our institutions, and that's why I think we're here today. And I wanted to also share with everybody this idea of, we talked about mentors, and we've talked about things, and there are different ways in which you can do that. And I found this chart to be quite helpful. It was published in the Harvard Business Review, and it talks about, there are public relationships you might have, and there are private relationships that you would nurture. So if you're a mentor, maybe you're a strategizer, maybe you're a connector. So maybe if you feel like you don't have capacity for it right now to mentor someone else, that if someone reaches out to you, maybe you can connect them with someone else who you think will really suit them and their needs. Or maybe you're advocating for this on a public sphere, which and so if you're interested in doing that too, and want to join the Women Ed regional team, reach out, and so that's something that we can do. And I wanted to also point out that sponsorship is also something slightly different than mentorship or coaching. And so this is one that's not on the list, but there is a bit of a difference. So sponsorship is generally like when you are coming in from, you know, you perhaps have power and influence, and you have this, and you see potential in someone, and you're able to leverage the power and influence you have to sponsor someone into a role, or to connect them with someone to do that. And so I think, like, you know, so sponsorship itself is maybe not a position, but it's something that you can do when you have the power and the privilege to be able to do that in the positions that we might have. So thank you so much for all of your insights there about you know, what sponsorship looks like in its many different dimensions. And the final question we really kind of wanted to ask all of you, and you can see that you know, the institutional, the societal, the cultural norms that are out there. In Germany, there is in German that's called like the Rabenmutter. There's a concept, right? So this raven mother. So if you happen to have children, and you're going off and you want to also have a professional success, that you're seen as being this Rabenmutter, yeah, which is a negative connotation of that we've all addressed and talked about in previously. But then you're also seen like, you know, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't as well, because if you don't have children, but you're in education and working with children. And then people also have, so there's this double bind and this bias that is perceived. So, oh, you can't possibly know about this because you don't have kids, right? And so I know that was definitely my personal experience being a homeroom teacher. You know, parents would come up and often say that, oh, well, you don't know, wait till you have kids, then you'll understand. And then when you do have kids, they'll be like, okay, well, oh, but you know, it's different. And so it might give me a different perspective, but it certainly doesn't change. It's the biases are out there, as Grace mentioned as well in her opening keynote. So as women in education, what other kind of societal expectations do you think hold you back professionally? Elizabeth, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think for me personally, you know, it's understanding what the possibilities are. And so for me, like, I really believe in this idea that you can't be what you can't see. And so if you don't have examples of leadership around you, it's really difficult to break down those walls or break down those barriers. And, you know, and then being a pioneer or being the person that is like the forefront of that. I suffer from perfectionism, and it's very difficult for me to put myself out there and to be likable and to get it 100% right. And I think that, I know, holds me back is what will other people think, you know? And so what I find is that is most helpful within my community professionally is having a space where we can co-create together and lean into the discomfort and practicing in very, very safe spaces what we can do. So yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to repeat and amplify what you just said. Like, so you can't be what you can't see, and I think that representation is something that we have. You know, those experiments that they did with thinking about, you know, draw a scientist, or what do you imagine a leader would be, and people would often draw a male scientist instead of a female scientist, and so yeah, the representation. I think that narrative is changing though, it's great to be a small part of that change.
Yes,
as well.
I think working with you has definitely been a very positive change for me professionally as well. And I feel very lucky in that regard. But it's so important that as women, we give each other, elevate each other and give each other these opportunities.
Yeah, and I know, Elizabeth, you're changing that narrative too in your own classroom as well.
I'm trying.
So that's great. What about you, Liza-Jo? What are your thoughts on this?
Go to look at the other end of the lifespan. Really, I think sometimes there's that massive expectation that as people get older, people are always looking for you to retire, or they're always assuming that maybe you're coming to the end of your career. And I've met some absolutely fantastic professional educators that are in their late 50s that people are assuming that they're ready to retire, and actually they've actually got an aspiration to be a head of school or to be a program manager and or to even be a principal. But because they haven't gone up that ladder that we're saying we don't necessarily have to look at climbing. They think they can't do it. And there is no reason. And I find it quite offensive. And it is an incivility for people to say to somebody, well, when are you going to retire? Aren't you ready to retire yet? Because actually, no, you can go on as working as long as you like, or as short as you like. Economically, people are having to work a lot longer. Why shouldn't people go from 30 years in the classroom to then using that experience to be a head of school or a principal? Why not? So I think society does hold us back concerning our age. So yeah, I think I think we're missing out on a massive raft of really, really highly experienced, talented women that could actually go on and be fantastic principals. Absolutely. And I think being a principal is often a really lonely place, because it is often the last step for many who don't then step off and do other things as some of us have. So it isn't necessarily something that you would be doing for 10, for 20 years. It might be something that could be a 5 to 7 year thing. So if you do decide you want to retire at the end of that, that's fine. But before you go, share your expertise with everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So yes, the biases some people might have related to age, whether it's like we've heard from Grace about being, too young for the role, and thank you for highlighting also, like, on the other end, some people might have misconceptions about what that is like as well, and yes, there's definitely I think some feelings that, and it could be different. Like we might have biases and unconscious that might think that males at that age, oh well, they're wiser, they're more experienced, and so there's also this performance bias that we might have related to age. So thank you so much for bringing that up. What are your thoughts on this, Grace?
I think something that held me back, it doesn't hold me back anymore, but it did for a while, especially in my first year as a school principal, not so much in my leading up to that leadership roles, but I felt like I was trying on like a leadership costume, and it was too small. And I was like, I don't know how to get this off. And I struggled with that in I'd say the first term of that first year. And the reason I was struggling with it was, just the societal expectation that I should lead like a man. And I think that we all need to lean into the fact that women can lead just as well as men. And it's okay to have your own style. But I think at the beginning, because I didn't have those female mentors, I was trying to, I don't know, like act like the male mentors I had. And that didn't fit me. I needed to bust out of that costume, and I could feel it. And I think other people could feel it. I wasn't myself. It wasn't how I wanted to lead. And I learned really quick that if I continued to do that, I was going to burn out very quickly. So I just had to kind of go, you know what? I can do this, and I can do it in my way. And that's okay. It's okay for me to show emotion. I'm not a robot. I'm a real human. It's okay for me to make jokes and not take it so seriously. I think anyone who knows me knows that I do that a lot, and that's who I am. So I think I had this image in my mind of a school leader who's very like serious, and I'm the principal, and that's so not me. And so once I just leaned into that and just started making crazy jokes and ate a sandwich in a faculty meeting, it was fine. And that was who I was. And I had to really lean into that. And I think that when you bulk against that societal expectation of how a leader should be, then it doesn't hold you back anymore. But it definitely did. And I think back to the teachers that I worked with during that first year. I think, oh, poor them. I was just I was a mess that first term. I didn't know who I was. And so I think it's just really important to lean into that. And to own that, yes, I'm a female leader and I've got great leadership skills, and I'm not going to do it the same way that a male would. And that's great. No problem with that.
Eleonore.
Yeah, thank you. Grace, I immediately jumped in and wanted to share what mostly resonates with that. And I start with what I tell to my students always in my lectures. I tell them there's a model where one of the core facts is, or core values is, providing feedback. And I tell them, unlike on that slide, I tell you to do not rely on feedback, because feedback can be withheld for various reasons. You were worthy to receive feedback, you didn't get it because someone was anxious to provide you an opportunity to improve, to grow. Or you are not given feedback because they are not able to understand what you did. So they just say, I'm okay, that was good. So societal expectations imposed on someone, or if you think that they are imposed to someone, that's two totally different things. You have to navigate in a world where you orientate yourself first. Where is your goal? Where is your why? We can go with Simon Sinek. Where's your why? I love it. Where's your goal? Where you want to go? What do I have? And looking at this picture is like, I don't see myself in there. I know this is a great picture. I know how everybody could chime in, but it's probably everybody who is white, westernized, and everything. So there are people who can win that race, who have no shoes, who are not even on that racetrack, who are still doing something else before they are having time for running a race. But I would rather run with those than with the ones at the starting line. So this is something that, you know, I always hope that this fact that I don't care about other people's thinking, except of the ones who are for me the boardroom. I always say it's not the circle I refer to, it's like the boardroom of people who like me so much that they want me to succeed and they tell me what I did wrong so that I can succeed, so that I can improve. You need to have those, and those aren't necessarily people who are older than you. I have students who tell me right away when I do something in social media, it's initiative is like, you shouldn't have done, I told you, and something like that. And this is leadership on eye level. I raise my kids on eye level, it hurts. It hurts. They're only 6 and 4 years old. I raise my students on eye level. It also sometimes hurts because they really live up to that and smash sometimes an argument. But that's really what I want to transfer them when they go from university to the jobs, or they're already in jobs. But this whole thing of new work and working co-creation and everything, that only works with an open growth mindset, that Carol Dweck image that you had before. And that means that you are able to see what is possible, and that you are also able to see when you had made progress on that journey. And you do not need people to cheer you up when you know by yourself that you made a step towards that. So I want my students to have this metric, that navigation system inbuilt in their brain that they use and not forget or value other feedback higher than their own impression.
Can I just piggyback off of that if we have a minute? Is that okay?
Sure. That
really resonated with me, Eleanor, and it's, you know, something I often try to remind myself and talk to other people about is, you know, feedback is so important, but you need to be self-aware.
Yes.
You need to be reflective and you need to understand yourself. And when you can do that, you can take on feedback in a way that's really healthy. And I think any leader, not just, I don't think this is unique to females, but perhaps we get it a bit more often. As soon as you step into that leadership role, people are suddenly quite generous with their criticisms and their critical feedback. And if you are a woman who's fallen to the likability trap, I have for sure, that's hard. And you need that self-reflection to anchor yourself, to know which criticisms to take and which ones to block out. And I always say, never take criticism from someone you wouldn't take advice from.
Yeah,
and the
good.
thing that I really try to remind myself when if someone's kind of being really niggly, is I say something like, in my head, you know what? I'm doing a good job. I'm doing the best I can. And I know that my best is pretty good. I have faults, of course, but it's pretty good. So the people who don't like what I'm doing, I don't want them to like what I'm doing. If they liked what I was doing, I'd be doing a pretty crappy job. So I think we need to kind of put context like that. You need to know who to take criticism from and how to use it. And you also need to know who to say, thank you for your feedback, and smile and period, and then walk away. So
Absolutely.
I think that's a key to burnout, not burning out, I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people have agendas, and it's important to know who the people are you can rely to or rely on, because they have the same agenda. At least that agenda is somewhat in parallel to yours.
Thank you so much. Wise words from our panelists today. And I know that we have gone over time, but it's just these conversations and all of your insights have been so invaluable that I just didn't want to stop anything that was coming up. We did have one other.
Just the perfect panelists, the combination. And you know, like this had to evolve like that, like very natural, and just a very, very nice group to talk to and to listen to. So thank you so much.
So maybe you can share how you can ensure women's full and effective participation in leadership at all levels of educational decision making. This was our final question, but I'm gonna just put that out there to everybody as well, and also open up the questions to people in the chat as well, so that you can contribute. And if there's anything specific you'd like to ask any of the panelists, I do know that Elizabeth was sadly she's reset her modem. She's back trying very hard to rejoin us, and so she's having a bit of difficulty there. But and I know Eleonore has a hard stop also at 12:30 because as a busy person, she's also got another commitment there as well. But thank goodness we planned lunch after this session, so that we can go a little bit over. So if you can stay on, do. If not, we completely understand. And I would like to, before I stop sharing my screen, just also thank everybody in case some of you do need to leave, and make sure that you stay connected with us as well, and through our Twitter handle. And if you have any other questions, do feel free to get in touch. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so that, and I know that Loretta and Layla were helping us to have a look at the questions as well, and or if there's anything else that any of our panelists would like to share, if there's something we didn't ask you that you're burning to tell us. Elizabeth, you're back! Yay! Welcome back. So it's good to see. And there's been a lot of love in the chat, I see as well.
Did you want us to answer the question about institutional support in the chat?
Sure, or Liza-Jo, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, you're saying how can we ensure women's full and effective participation in leadership at all levels of educational decision making? And I don't think we can ensure it, because to ensure it means that we've got there. And this is an ongoing thing, isn't it? We are the people shaking the rattles, aren't we, for inclusion and diversity. And as women, we're doing it for all, whichever gender, female, male, transgender, female, transgender, male, whatever. We're shaking the rattle for everybody. So I don't think we can ensure it. But what I do think we can do to support effective participation is to actually do that self-reflection, look in the mirror, and recognise our own unconscious bias. Recognise it, we've all got it. Come on, let's put our hands up. Within the first couple of seconds of meeting somebody, your brain has made a load of decisions for you. Otherwise, your brain would explode if you had to make them all yourselves. To recognise that unconscious bias and actually think about, do you wholeheartedly believe you treat everyone fairly, equally, and more importantly, equitably? Do you try and remove the barriers for everybody so everybody is got it on the same level playing field? And are you open with others about your shortcomings? Grace eloquently there said, I'm fantastic, but I'm not perfect. And we wouldn't want to be, because you'd never, ever move forward. And are you open to learning from others? And are your behaviours aligned with your actual beliefs? So within organisations, we have core values, and the team can tell you them wrote, can't they? But then you look at the behaviours and they don't always line up with the values that are displayed. So the final thing for me, how we can help with this, is check whether we consistently hold ourselves and others accountable for inclusion. And just be aware, as Fidel from the 16th century said, be accountable for what you do, but more importantly, accountable for what you don't do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that itself would go a long way to help with leadership in all levels of decision making.
Excellent points there, Liza-Jo. And definitely being reflective enough to think about where our blind spots are, what we don't do, right, what we're not seeing, and so having our colleagues there to help us see that. Yeah. Eleonore, did you put I saw a hand raised.
Thanks. There's a quote that I cannot unfortunately refer to the right person, but the quote goes like this: I don't take feedback from someone who is not with me in the arena. And I think that's so powerful, because there are people at the fence who say, like a football, soccer game, yeah, you should have done this, are you stupid? And when you look at them, they're not sporty, then they haven't achieved anything, they weren't on the playing field, right? So it's like, just be aware who can be the feedback giver, that you would, if he or she is an advocate for you, that you would listen. Some may be coaches, some may be right in the arena with you, but still have a different agenda. But that circles, that short lines, the short lists, the people that you should take advice from.
Yeah, we've got some feedback in the participant area, or some helpful things. It was from Brene Brown, that quote as well. And yeah, and Grace wrote that the chirping from the nosebleed section is not always helpful, sometimes, but not always. Yeah. Thank you.
Are there any questions from you that you would like to ask the panelists? Yes, Estelle.
Hi. So it's not a question, and I have to be very honest. I don't even know what I'm doing here, because I'm not even in education or anything. I came on Julia's recommendation, and also because I saw your poster where you were including the transgender community. And that was, as a mom of a transgender kid, I can tell you how